Okay, so we spoke earlier on about not being rigid in the arms. When a motorcycle travels at a very low speed, it is quite natural for the front wheel to want to wobble left and right. If we have relaxed arms, we can allow that process to take place. But if we become very rigid, that process cannot happen, and therefore the motorcycle becomes very uncomfortable. So what I'm going to show you first of all is riding the bike slowly without using the rear brake. So I'll gently bring the revs up, allow the clutch to come to the bite, and then just into that friction zone. Notice how the head and eyes are up and the front end is wobbling a little bit. So what I will do now is I'll do the same manoeuvre with a bit more power and a little bit of rear brake. And you can see there that we're a lot slower. We're making little adjustments with the steering. The revs are up, the clutch is slipped, but we can control the bike very slowly. Now, if I start to manoeuvre the bike, you'll see that my head and eyes are, as we discussed, parallel to the ground, and I'm looking well up to where I want that machine to go. I'm using just enough power to control the machine, just enough brake, but I'm never fully engaging my clutch. So if I want to come towards you, I just look where you are. If I want to turn left, I look to the left, and the bike goes to the left. Now, one thing that a lot of new riders will do, if it starts to go wrong, they close the throttle, bring the clutch in, grab the front brake, put the foot down. That's your basic human instinct. We're programmed to do certain things. Most of your human instincts on a motorcycle are wrong. So rather than having the instinct of shut the throttle, pull the clutch in, put your foot down, grab the brake, when we feel that area of slight lack of stability on the bike, we need to learn to increase the power, increase the drive at the back wheel, and as we get used to feeling the bike stabilise, our trained instinct will become able to regain stability of the bike rather than panicking and putting it in a situation where it could fall on the floor. And of course, if your bars are turned and the bike is leaning, if you shut the power, grab the brake, the bike will fall to the inside of the turn every time. So if you've got plenty of space to practice in, increase the power, straighten the bars, look where you want to go, and you'll just breeze out of the exercise. Little demonstration for you. So as soon as I feel the bike start to tip, bring the power on, let the bike ride away. And then what eventually you'll get is you'll get the instinct of rather than putting on lots and lots of power, you'll put on just enough power to get the motorcycle out of trouble. And when you're first learning, it doesn't matter if you over-rev the motorcycle. I'm not going to do it a lot on this one. As I said, we've got dry clutch to think about. But if you're on a wet clutch bike, generally speaking, you won't have a problem. So the next thing we're going to talk about is turning a motorcycle at slow speeds. You'll notice here I'm going to go fairly slowly using the rear brake to stabilise me. And you'll notice that the motorcycle isn't leaning very much. And that's because it's really slow. It doesn't need to lean that much because the speeds are low. And you'll notice that as I'm feeling the bike, feeling that it's losing a bit of stability, I just tweak that power and I'm looking where I want to go. So I'm looking right above the middle of those blue cones. And that helps my balance, but it helps me keep the power up because I'm looking where I want to go. And what you notice is my head and eyes come round and I'm looking above the gap in the blue cones. There's my entry through. And as I come through, I keep my head moving. I keep it parallel to the ground and I look well ahead. And I'm trying to get the view through the gap above the blue cones at the earliest opportunity. And by combining the clutch slip, the power, and the rear brake, it keeps the bike under control. And my relaxed riding position and vision means I can get the bike to go exactly
where I want. So that was going around really slowly.
Now if I go a bit faster, I can lean the bike more. Principle's the same, bit of rear brake, clutch slip, head and eyes, but I lean that bike over because we're gaining a bit more momentum. Remember how important it is to use your body and your hips. You're not just steering with your arms, far from it. And this is where the upper body needs to be relaxed.
So I'm not looking at the floor. I'm not sure exactly what view the camera is giving you, but my eyes are parallel to the ground. And some people say to me, how do I know it's safe if I'm not looking at the floor? You always check out the ground before you ride on it. And your peripheral vision and your searching eyes will tell you if the ground is safe before you reach it. And if it's not, you're not going on it. Remember, your eyes aren't fixed. We're not staring. We're still keeping relaxed in our vision, and we're just keeping the eyes up and looking where we want to go. So we're going to go into the slalom now. And let's go through a reasonable speed with a bit of momentum. So I'm just looking well ahead. I'm not looking down at the cones at all. I'm using my peripheral vision. And I'm using my spatial awareness. But I'm looking in the direction of where I want the motorcycle to go. So same technique, clutch slip, rear brake, keeping the power on, a little bit more power if I think it needs it. I'm just relaxing into it and letting the bike take me. We use a phrase quite often, don't fight the bike. The bike will do what you want it to do if you let it. They're very good at it. This bike will outride me all day long.
It's the same technique.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through the slalom a lot more slowly. Exactly the same principles apply. I'm using a little bit more rear brake, keeping the head and eyes up. Now, this is more difficult because it's so much slower. Listen to those revs. Can you see we're just below 2,000 revs? And if I think it's going to fall, I can increase them a little bit. I've got that clutch just in the sweet spot. I can drop the revs off a little bit when I'm not turning, and then to turn, I just bring the revs up.
I'm using a lot more steering. Still have to keep my head and eyes up. I'm never going to look at the cones. Don't ever look at the cones. You need to rely on your peripheral vision and spatial awareness. This is physics in action. It's not like a horse. It's not going to change its mind. It's not going to do something odd. It'll do what you tell it to according to the laws of physics.
So we'll have a look at the U-turn now. Now I will use rear observations just out of habit really. Your instructor on your training course will explain to you in more detail about rear observations for U-turns. But let's just look at the control of the bike. So we use exactly the same technique. We look where we want to go before we start to turn. Then we turn into the manoeuvre, keeping those head and eyes up, looking through the turn. So turn your head before you turn and lean the bike. Big mistake I see is people turning the bike but not looking in the direction of the turn. Now where you look, unless you make a conscious effort to do something different, is where you're going to go. And when you first start doing U-turns, give yourself plenty of space and use as much room as you like, just so you get used to the technique and the act of turning. When you become more competent, then you can start leaning the bike a bit more and increasing the revs a bit more, so that your U-turn is a lot tighter. And so if I want to go really tight, I'll use more revs than normal, just as a safety blanket. And that way, you know the bike should not, providing your clutch is correct, fall over. So if you disengage the clutch fully during a turn at low speeds, you are very likely that the bike will fall. The smoothness and the finesse with which you use the controls on these bikes is absolutely vitally important to everything you do. So one of the exercises you do on your module 1 is the slow speed controlled ride in a straight line. And you can see there the bars are just twitching a little bit left and right because I'm really slow, and I'm only at 1500 revs on this. It'll vary from bike to bike. I'm using the rear brake, I'm relaxed, I'm gripping the tank a little bit with my knees, but I'm looking well into the distance. And I'm absolutely at walking pace, probably less than walking pace. I'm only just showing on the speedo. So that was probably about 1 mile an hour. Practice makes perfect, and it builds confidence, and you can transfer all of these skills, as we've already said, onto the road. So just using that slow speed control technique, we come to the junction nice and slow. We've got loads of time to observe, and then when it's good, we just increase the power and away we go. It's the same for a right turn. We just use slow speed control technique. We can assess the junction, come in nice and slow, decide whether to stop or go, and it's job done. So at the end of the road I'm going to turn right. So I'm using both brakes to slow the machine down, but now I'm going to go into slow speed control mode. Get my gearing correct, first gear, off the front brake, onto the back brake. Let's get the view. So I'm nice and slow, it gives me time to assess the junction. Now I have to stop, so I'm quite capable of making that stop at that very low speed purely on the back brake. I don't need the front. If I'd have used the front brake, it would have sent the weight forwards and slightly into the turn, which would have upset the balance. So even though we're turning left at the roundabout, I can consider using slow speed control technique, which I am now going to use. I don't want to stop if I can avoid it. There we go, still using that technique. I have finally got to stop because of the Ford, but I had plenty of time to consider what I was going to do and observe what was going on. So we're going to turn right at this mini roundabout, and this is a hazard where I could use slow speed control technique. So slipping the clutch, bit of rear brake, bit of power, gently through in case he pulls out in front of me, clutch fully engages right away. So just for that brief moment to enter the hazard, we use the slow speed control technique. Very helpful. So like here, we're approaching the traffic lights. I just go into slow speed control technique. I may still have to stop, but at the moment I'm just gently riding along using that technique. I haven't got to stop, I haven't got to put any feet down whatsoever, and as the traffic starts to move, away we go. So that's the end of this video. If you do practice, take care. Remember what we said about it's likely you may drop your bike, so take care not to. Take those precautions if you're particularly concerned about that. Do practice, and if it gets too much, take a break and go back to it another time. With practice will come skill and confidence. So there's no substitute for training under the eyes of a professional instructor, because that instructor may see things that you're not doing quite right, that you may not be aware of. But once you've had a little bit of guidance under an instructor's eye, if necessary, you can only go from strength to strength and get better and better. So until next time, ride safe, take care, see you again.